Have you ever heard the silence that follows a wolf's howl in the dark forest? That silence, it is not peace. It is the moment the world listens, because something real has spoken. Now I ask you to listen, not with your ears, but with the still part of your being. There is a sickness that wears the smile of virtue. It bows its head, it agrees, it complies, and it calls itself nice. But niceness is not kindness, it is not strength, it is not truth. A nice person often lives like a ghost, seen but not known. Present yet absent, they say yes, while screaming no inside. They help not from abundance but from fear. They shrink to fit in, apologize for breathing too deeply, and label their silence as wisdom. But what is repressed will ferment, and what ferments in darkness becomes poison, not just for you, but for the world around you. You see, niceness is the armor of the unlived life. It is the carefully stitched mask of those who fear rejection more than falsehood. Those who would rather have you ever walked into a room and felt like you had to shrink yourself just to fit the atmosphere. Have you ever smiled when your soul wanted to weep, nodded when your spirit screamed in disagreement, or offered help when you yourself were falling apart? That is the quiet tragedy of being nice. Society celebrates it, praises it, teaches it from childhood as a gold standard of behavior. But niceness, in the way it is most commonly practiced, is not a virtue. It is a mask, beautiful, polished, and suffocating. To be nice is often to be agreeable, inoffensive, pleasing. It is the art of not disturbing others, of smoothing over discomfort, of hiding one's sharper edges in order to be accepted. But here lies the deception. Being nice is not the same as being kind, compassionate, or wise. It is a socially conditioned habit of self-abandonment, a training in subtle suppression. It is rarely motivated by love. More often, it is born out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being seen for who we truly are, with all the discomfort and rawness that truth brings. From an early age, many are taught that being liked is the currency of belonging. And to be liked, one must not offend, one must not assert, one must not disagree too boldly, speak too freely, or shine too brightly. We are taught, often without words, to sand down our uniqueness, to mask our instincts, and to tolerate what wounds us, all in the name of being nice. We become trained actors on the stage of social acceptability, performing roles that win approval but cost us our authenticity. Niceness, when examined deeply, is not an expression of the soul but a strategy of the ego. It is a survival tactic, a way to navigate the world while minimizing risk. It says, if I keep everyone happy, I will be safe. If I do not upset anyone, I will be loved. This is a logic carved from childhood wounds and reinforced by the collective unconscious. But what is safety if it costs you your voice? What is love if it is only offered to a version of you that does not truly exist? In the name of being nice, people say yes when they mean no. They offer agreement when their inner compass screams dissent. They pretend to enjoy the company of those who drain their energy. They laugh at jokes that offend their sense of truth. They offer help not because they are full, but because they are too afraid to disappoint. In time, this becomes a form of spiritual self-harm, a subtle erosion of the inner life. The self becomes hollowed out, like a tree eaten from within. On the outside, it still looks strong, still looks nice, but on the inside, it is empty. There is a great difference between a kind heart and a nice facade. A kind heart operates from compassion, from grounded strength, from alignment with deeper values. Kindness can say no. Kindness can walk away. Kindness has boundaries and clarity. It does not betray the self in order to preserve appearances, but niceness is not anchored in such clarity. It is often foggy, uncertain, and reactive. It aims not for truth, but for acceptance at all costs. And in that pursuit, it commits a quiet betrayal, not of others, but of oneself. The nice person becomes adept at shifting. In one room, they are cheerful, in another, silent. In yet another, they mirror whatever is expected. This is not flexibility, it is fragmentation. Over time, they forget who they are when no one is watching. They lose the thread of their own authenticity because they've woven themselves into everyone else's expectations. They become liked but unknown, even to themselves, and perhaps the most dangerous part of niceness is that it is praised. Society rewards those who don't stir the pot, who smile through discomfort, who agree for the sake of harmony. But this harmony is hollow. It is built not on understanding but on avoidance, not on truth but on pretense. In such an environment, real connection cannot thrive, because real connection requires truth. It requires vulnerability. It requires the courage to be seen, not just admired. Niceness can become a prison. The walls are built from politeness, the bars from the fear of judgment. And the prisoner, having worn the mask for so long, forgets that it is even a mask. They begin to believe that this version of themselves, the one who never offends, never challenges, never speaks too loudly, is who they really are. But deep inside, the soul knows. The soul remembers. And the longer it is silenced, the more it aches, the more it grows restless, screaming in dreams, in moments of solitude, in quiet breakdowns that no one else can see. There is a cost to being perpetually nice. The cost is the life unlived, the words unsaid, the dreams deferred, the anger swallowed, the boundaries crossed and never reclaimed, the quiet regret of a life spent performing instead of being. And the tragedy is that many do not realize this until much later, when resentment simmers beneath the surface, when exhaustion sets in, when they look in the mirror and do not recognize the person staring back. Niceness is not harmless. It enables toxicity, rewards manipulation, and punishes truth telling. In relationships, nice people often attract those who take advantage of their silence. In workplaces, they are passed over or overloaded. In families, they are the ones who keep the peace at the expense of their own sanity. And the longer this dynamic continues, the more they begin to feel invisible. Not because others cannot see them, but because they have spent so long dimming their light that they no longer know how to shine. The mask of niceness is seductive because it promises acceptance, but it never delivers belonging, because belonging can only arise when we are known, not as a persona, but as a person, not as a projection, but as a presence. To remove the mask is terrifying. It invites risk. It may disrupt relationships, stir conflict, or reveal uncomfortable truths. But it also opens the door to something deeper, liberation. To live without the mask is to reclaim your own authority, your own voice, your own center of gravity. When you remove the mask of niceness, what emerges is not cruelty or arrogance, but clarity. You begin to act not from fear, but from alignment. You stop seeking to be liked and begin to live in a way that is consistent with your values. You speak not to please, but to express. You say yes when you mean it and no when it is necessary. You become trustworthy, not because you never upset anyone, but because you are real. This is not a call to discard compassion or to become hardened. It is a call to differentiate between surface politeness and deep integrity, between being liked and being respected, between being agreeable and being authentic. When you choose authenticity over niceness, you may lose some approval, but what you gain is incomparable. You gain peace, you gain freedom, you gain yourself. There is a certain beauty in becoming unafraid to disappoint others in order to be faithful to yourself. it does not mean you become insensitive. It means you learn to serve without self-sacrifice, to connect without pretending, to lead without performing. It means you allow others to meet the real you, not the polished version, not the edited version, but the version that breathes, feels, falters, and dares to live fully. That version is not always nice, but it is deeply human and profoundly alive. There is a strange silence that exists in people who have spent too long hiding what they truly feel. It is not the silence of peace or wisdom. It is the silence of something buried alive. Repressed truth is not dead truth. It is truth in exile, pacing in the dark corridors of the psyche, waiting, growing heavier, sharper, more restless, and over time, that repressed truth turns toxic. Not because it is wrong, but because it was never allowed to breathe. When we suppress what we know, what we feel, what we long to say, it doesn't disappear. It settles into the body, into the tightness in the throat that never fully releases, into the stiffness in the jaw, the fatigue in the chest, the pressure behind the eyes. Truth, when silenced, becomes a physical presence, and the longer it is denied, the more forcefully it tries to speak, not through words, but through symptoms. Illness, anxiety, depression, chronic exhaustion. The body becomes the messenger when the mouth is muted. People who repress their truth often do so not because they lack awareness, but because they fear the consequences of expression. They fear being judged, misunderstood, or abandoned. They fear disrupting harmony, appearing selfish, or being labeled as difficult. And so, they swallow their truth in the name of maintaining peace. But this is a fragile peace. It is the kind of peace that demands silence over honesty, appearance over authenticity. It is a peace that poisons the one who upholds it. The stories that go untold do not fade. They echo in our subconscious. The anger that goes unexpressed does not vanish. It festers beneath the surface, often turning inward. What cannot be said begins to shape how we see ourselves and the world. Repression creates distortion. Over time, the one who constantly hides their truth begins to lose the ability to distinguish between what they feel and what they are expected to feel. They become disconnected from their inner compass, navigating life through fog instead of clarity. This disconnection is not accidental. It is a defense. Repressing truth is a way of protecting oneself from perceived danger. But when the act of protecting becomes habitual, it becomes self-destructive. We begin to live in fragments, with parts of ourselves sealed off from consciousness. We smile when we want to cry. We agree when we want to scream. We give when we are empty. This split between the outer persona and the inner truth is the root of profound suffering. There is a loneliness in living this way, even when surrounded by others, because the connection we crave is not simply presence, it is presence with truth. When your truth is hidden, the love you receive doesn't reach you, because it's aimed at the mask, not the soul. You may be admired, even cherished, but always with the haunting awareness that no one really knows you, and how can they, when you've buried the most essential parts of yourself just to belong? Human beings are not designed to live in permanent conflict with themselves. The internal war between what is felt and what is shown eventually takes its toll. This war cannot be won through suppression. It can only be resolved through reconciliation. But reconciliation requires honesty. And honesty is not comfortable. It disrupts, it exposes, it demands vulnerability. That is why it is so often delayed. Repressed truth also damages relationships. People think that by withholding, they are protecting others. But what they're really doing is building invisible walls. Intimacy cannot grow in an environment where truth is unsafe. We may believe that staying silent preserves love, but in truth, it erodes it. Because love without truth is a performance, not a connection. Eventually, the resentment builds. The small things that were overlooked, tolerated, and endured begin to accumulate. 100 quiet compromises grow into a storm of bitterness. And when it finally erupts, it seems sudden to others, but it has been simmering for years. There is nothing noble about repressing yourself for the comfort of others. There is nothing virtuous in silencing your truth to avoid temporary discomfort. In fact, repression is a form of slow self-abandonment. Each time you deny your own experience, you reinforce the idea that your feelings don't matter, that your voice is not worth hearing, that your needs are less important than someone else's approval. And over time, that belief calcifies. It becomes a core wound. It becomes the lens through which you view every interaction. And still, the world often encourages this. We are taught to be polite, to be agreeable, to not make waves. Emotional expression is often labeled as dramatic, excessive, or selfish. This creates a culture of repression where vulnerability is seen as weakness and silence is mistaken for strength. But real strength is not found in quiet suffering. It is found in the courage to be seen, the courage to tell the truth even when your voice shakes, the courage to say, "This is who I am," without flinching. When truth is spoken, even if it is difficult, something sacred happens. There is a clearing, a release, a space opens where something new can grow. Speaking the truth is not always about confrontation. Sometimes it is about liberation. It is about finally stepping out of the roles you've been playing and standing in the rawness of your own being. That moment, though terrifying, is the beginning of healing. Because once the truth is known, you are no longer a stranger to yourself. Even the truths we fear the most are not as dangerous as the lies we live to avoid them. We fear that speaking up will ruin everything, but in reality, silence slowly ruins everything more effectively. It just takes longer. It corrodes the foundation without making a sound, until one day the whole structure collapses and no one understands why. But deep down, you know, it was not one moment that broke you. It was the accumulation of every unspoken truth. Repressed truth also steals joy, because to feel joy fully, we must be present, and to be present, we must be whole. But when parts of us are hidden, joy feels distant, muted. It arrives, but cannot stay. It cannot take root in soil that has been hardened by denial. Even love, when it comes, cannot reach us if we are buried beneath layers of unexpressed emotion. To receive love, we must be available, and availability requires authenticity. There is power in truth, not just for the self, but for the collective. When one person tells the truth, it creates a ripple. It invites others to do the same. It disrupts the culture of repression and replaces it with one of honesty and aliveness. Truth is contagious in the best way. It wakes people up. It softens walls. It calls forth realness. And realness is what the soul longs for. Repressing truth is a form of spiritual anemia. It starves the self of meaning and connection. But expressing truth, even when imperfectly, is an act of alignment. It restores vitality. It reconnects you to your own center. It reminds you that your experience matters, that your feelings are valid, that your voice deserves space. No one can carry the weight of silence forever. Eventually, it breaks through. In illness, in breakdowns, in explosions of emotion that feel out of proportion, but are really years in the making. Truth demands to be known, if not through choice, then through consequence. That is why the practice of honesty, even in small doses, is essential. Not for others, but for yourself. Not to be right, but to be real. You cannot live fully if you are hiding. You cannot love deeply if you are guarded. You cannot be free if your truth is in chains. The soul is not meant to be caged. It is meant to breathe, to speak, to dance, and the longer it is kept in darkness, the more violently it tries to escape. That violence may not be directed outward, but it always leaves a mark on the body, on the mind, on the heart. Truth is not always beautiful. Sometimes it is messy, painful, disruptive, but even in its rawness, it carries light. It clears the air, it dissolves illusions, it reconnects us to what is real, and in a world full of noise, illusions, and masks, what is real is sacred. To live without repressing truth is not to live recklessly, but to live responsibly. Because truth is a responsibility, first to yourself, then to others, and finally to the world. When you live aligned with what you know, feel, and value, you become a force of clarity, not always liked, but deeply respected, not always comfortable, but always whole, and wholeness is where true peace begins. There is a quiet moment in every life when a choice must be made, not between right and wrong, but between who you truly are and who you've been taught to be. This moment rarely arrives with fanfare or ceremony. Often, it appears in the stillness of an ordinary day, a conversation that leaves you hollow, a decision that doesn't sit right, a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels foreign on the inside. In that space of inner dissonance, authenticity begins to stir, not as a demand, but as a whisper, a call, a memory of something more real than the performance you've grown used to. Authenticity is not the comfortable path. It is not compliance. It does not bend to expectation. It does not bow to approval. It is not the art of fitting in, but the act of standing out, not through rebellion or defiance, but through presence. It requires courage because it disrupts. It disturbs the narratives you've told yourself to survive. It questions the masks you've worn to belong. It threatens the relationships built on who you pretended to be. To be authentic is not to reject the world, but to stop rejecting yourself. We are conditioned to believe that if we obey the rules, life will reward us. That if we say the right things, please the right people, choose the path of least resistance, we will be safe. But compliance is not safety. It is sedation. It dulls the senses, flattens the spirit, and keeps the soul in chains. You become liked, but not known, valued, but not understood, present, but not alive. Compliance is easy. It requires no depth, no integrity, no presence. You only need to follow. But what good is a life lived by instructions that are not your own? Authenticity, on the other hand, is an act of inner revolution. It is the shedding of layers you no longer recognize, the refusal to pretend, the decision to inhabit your life from the inside out. It begins with the smallest of choices, saying no when you mean no, asking for what you need, expressing what you feel without apology, letting go of what no longer resonates even when it disappoints others. These are not grand gestures, they are sacred acts. They reclaim the parts of you that were abandoned to make others comfortable. To be authentic is to be rooted in truth, not just intellectual truth, but embodied truth. The truth of your gut instincts, your emotional signals, your unfiltered observations. This truth doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes it arrives as a tightening in the chest, a flicker of discomfort, a sense that something is off. Most people ignore these signs because truth, when followed, often leads away from the familiar. It leads into uncertainty, into change, into the possibility of being misunderstood. But to ignore these signals is to silence your deepest guidance system. Authenticity requires the courage to stand alone. There will be moments when your truth is inconvenient to others, when it challenges their perception of you, when it makes them uncomfortable, you will be tempted to soften your edges, to retract your voice, to retreat into silence. But in doing so, you compromise the very essence of your being. You trade your wholeness for acceptance. An acceptance that comes at the cost of authenticity is not belonging. It is a contract of spiritual exile. The world does not need more people who comply. It needs people who come alive. People who are unafraid to be seen in their entirety. Not just the polished parts, but the messy, raw, unfiltered humanity that lies beneath. Authenticity is magnetic, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. It resonates at a frequency that others can feel. It invites depth, honesty, and presence. And in a world flooded with illusion, presence is revolutionary. But authenticity is not indulgence. It is not the license to speak without care, to act without awareness, to justify harm in the name of being real. Authenticity is a discipline. It is the constant, often uncomfortable practice of aligning your actions with your values. It asks you to examine your motives, to take responsibility for your impact, to live with integrity even when no one is watching. It demands that you stop performing and start participating in your own life, in your own choices, in your own evolution. Compliance keeps you stuck in roles that no longer serve you: the good daughter, the loyal employee, the agreeable friend, the obedient partner. These roles are rewarded because they maintain the status quo. But the price of playing them is the gradual disappearance of your own voice. You become an echo of others' expectations, a reflection of someone else's story. Authenticity calls you back to your own center. It says, stop pretending, stop hiding, start listening. What do you know beneath the noise? What do you want beyond the script? This calling is not always loud. It does not always come with clarity. Sometimes it emerges through contrast, through moments when you feel off, disconnected, numb. These are not signs of failure, but invitations to return. Every discomfort, every dissonance, every moment of internal conflict is a signal you are out of alignment. Not with others, but with yourself. Authenticity is not something you find. It is something you return to, again and again, like a home. The path of authenticity is narrow, not because it is exclusive, but because it is precise. It requires discernment. It asks you to know the difference between what is true and what is convenient, between what is aligned and what is expected, between what serves your growth and what satisfies your fear. This path is not paved with certainty. It is paved with choice, and every choice you make in the direction of truth strengthens the muscle of your courage. The myth of compliance is that it will protect you, that if you conform enough, you will not be hurt, that if you are agreeable enough, you will not be abandoned. But the truth is, you can comply your way into invisibility. You can please your way into depression. You can adapt so much that you no longer remember what joy feels like. Safety that costs you your soul is not safety. It is a slow suffocation. To be authentic is to risk rejection, to risk being misunderstood, to risk failure, but it is also to risk awakening, to risk meaning, to risk freedom. And what greater risk is there than living a life that was never truly yours? Authenticity is not a one-time declaration. It is a daily devotion. It asks you to be honest when lying would be easier, to show up when disappearing feels safer, to speak when silence would protect your image. It is the ongoing, imperfect commitment to live in alignment with your own soul. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. There is a sacred discomfort that comes with telling the truth, but there is also a sacred liberation. When you begin to live authentically, you shed the weight of pretense. You no longer need to remember who you were pretending to be. You no longer need to exhaust yourself managing the perceptions of others. You begin to move with a quiet power, not loud, not boastful, but grounded, centered, whole. People may resist your authenticity, not because it is wrong, but because it confronts their own fear. Your freedom may trigger their chains. Your clarity may disturb their confusion. That is not your burden to carry. You are not responsible for others' comfort. You are responsible for your own alignment, and in staying true to that alignment, you offer the world something rare, truth in human form. The journey is not linear. There will be moments when you slip back into roles, into masks, into silence. This is not failure. It is human. The practice is in the returning, in noticing when you've left yourself and gently, firmly coming back. Every return strengthens your voice. Every return deepens your presence. Every return is a reminder you are allowed to be here as you are. In a culture that rewards conformity, choosing authenticity is an act of defiance. But it is also an act of love. Love for your own life. Love for the truth. Love for the sacred privilege of being human. Not perfect, not polished, but present. Fully, unapologetically present. There is no map for this journey. No script, no final destination. Only the ongoing invitation to live from the inside out. To let your outer life be a reflection of your inner truth. To let your presence speak louder than your performance. And to let the courage of your authenticity light the way for others to do the same. There is a growing hunger in the world, not for entertainment, not for information, not even for progress in the traditional sense. It is a hunger for something more elemental, something more elusive, realness. In a society that rewards polished surfaces and polite facades, realness has become a rare and sacred currency. People are starving not because there is a shortage of interaction, but because there is a shortage of genuine connection. The kind of connection that cannot be faked, performed, or packaged. The kind that only arises when masks fall away and something unfiltered is allowed to emerge. We are surrounded by niceness, pleasant greetings, courteous smiles, agreeable words. But niceness, as it is commonly practiced, is not a virtue. It is often a costume, a habit of self-erasure disguised as kindness. It is not born from authenticity but from fear. The fear of conflict, the fear of rejection, the fear of standing out or offending. Niceness is rarely about being good. It is about being accepted. And so we trade honesty for harmony, sincerity for safety, truth for appearances. But in doing so, we dilute ourselves and in turn, dilute every relationship we touch. Realness, unlike niceness, is not afraid to be uncomfortable. It does not exist to please. It exists to express what is true. It is rooted in presence, not performance. Realness can be tender, but it can also be fierce. It can comfort and it can challenge. It does not twist itself to fit expectations. It does not abandon its center for the sake of keeping the peace. Realness is not loud, not necessarily rebellious, but it is unmistakably alive. It carries a charge, a vibration, an unshakable grounding in what is. There is a difference between being nice and being kind. Kindness requires strength. It is a conscious choice that emerges from integrity. Niceness requires only compliance. It is a social lubricant, a way of avoiding friction. But life, real life, is full of friction. Growth comes from it. Transformation requires it. Relationships deepen through it. To eliminate all friction is to eliminate all depth. When we are only nice, we remain on the surface, skimming across the water of life without ever diving in. Realness is what gives life its texture. It is the trembling voice that speaks an uncomfortable truth. It is the eyes that do not look away when pain is present. It is the courage to say, "I don't know," in a world addicted to certainty. Realness cannot be faked. It cannot be copied. It is born of direct experience and self-honesty. It is often quiet, sometimes awkward, rarely perfect, but always trustworthy. When someone is being real, you feel it. Something inside you relaxes because there is nothing to decode, nothing to chase, nothing to doubt. We live in a time where performance is everywhere. Social media offers endless platforms for curated identity. Opinions are sculpted for likes, feelings are filtered through trends, and presence is substituted with persona. In this environment, realness becomes a kind of rebellion, not through grand gestures, but through the simple, consistent refusal to pretend. To say what you mean, to feel what you feel, to be who you are even when it doesn't come with applause. Niceness can become a prison. It demands that you silence the parts of yourself that are inconvenient. It tells you that anger is dangerous, sadness is weakness, and vulnerability is indulgent. It conditions you to wear a smile even when you are breaking inside. It praises you for being agreeable even when your boundaries are being crossed. Over time, this dissonance between who you are and who you pretend to be corrodes the soul. You begin to feel invisible, not because no one sees you, but because you have stopped showing up as yourself. Realness is an act of self-remembering. It begins with noticing where you are shrinking, where you are shifting, where you are saying yes when you mean no. It invites you to pause, to listen, to tell the truth, not because it's comfortable, but because it's clean. Because it aligns you with yourself, and in that alignment, there is freedom. Not the kind of freedom that shouts or fights, but the kind that breathes, that settles, that anchors you in the quiet dignity of your own being. The world is aching for this kind of presence, not perfection, not expertise, presence. People want to feel you, not just interact with your shell. They want to know what moves you, what breaks you open, what lights you up from the inside. They want to connect with the parts of you that are raw, unpolished, evolving, not the version of you that checks all the boxes, but the one that lives between the lines. Realness is where empathy is born, not through niceties, but through shared humanity. When you are real, you give others permission to be real too. You create a space where authenticity is safe, where stories don't need to be censored, where pain doesn't need to be hidden, where joy can be loud and sorrow can be seen. This is not chaos. It is coherence. It is what happens when people show up with their whole selves instead of just the fragments they think will be accepted. In this space, intimacy flourishes, healing begins, transformation becomes possible. Niceness, by contrast, maintains the status quo. It keeps conversations shallow, emotions suppressed, and power imbalances intact. It upholds false harmony by silencing real needs. It tells people what they want to hear rather than what they need to know. In many ways, niceness is the mask that allows dysfunction to go unchecked. Because as long as everyone is smiling, no one has to feel. No one has to change. But smiles can be weapons. They can be used to deflect, to manipulate, to control. Not all smiles are kind. Not all softness is sincerity. There is a spiritual dimension to realness. It requires a deep and ongoing relationship with your inner world. It asks you to feel, to question, to unlearn, to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, to embrace contradiction instead of resolving it. Realness does not seek tidy answers. It is content with living the questions, with being in process, with honoring complexity. This is why it is so rare, because it cannot be faked and it cannot be hurried. Niceness on the surface feels safe, but over time it breeds resentment, because when you are constantly prioritizing others' comfort over your own truth, something begins to fracture inside. You start to feel unseen, unheard, unlived. Your words become echoes instead of expressions. Your relationships become scripts instead of conversations. Your life becomes a stage instead of a sanctuary. The cost of niceness is often your own aliveness. Realness may not always win you approval, but it will earn you respect, especially your own. It will align you with the people who can meet you at your depth, who value truth over politeness, who are not afraid of your intensity or your silence. These are the relationships that matter, not the ones built on mutual convenience, but the ones forged in honesty, presence, and shared evolution. You cannot attract what is real if you are living as a replica. To be real is not to be raw all the time. It is not about emotional dumping or reckless expression. It is about congruence, about living in alignment with what you know, what you feel, and what you value. It is about showing up with integrity, even when it costs you comfort. It is about allowing others to know the truth of who you are, not just the version of you that is easy to digest. This is not easy, but it is essential. The world does not need more pleasantries. It needs more presence. It needs more people who are willing to drop the act and stand in their truth, who are not afraid to be seen in their vulnerability, their uncertainty, their becoming, who do not mistake politeness for love or silence for peace, who understand that realness is the foundation of everything that matters. Love, trust, intimacy, purpose, and freedom. Niceness is easy to imitate. Realness is hard to find, but once you've tasted the truth of who you are, there is no going back. The masks become suffocating, the performances lose their appeal, you begin to crave a deeper kind of nourishment. Conversations that open you, people who reflect your soul, spaces where you don't have to filter your thoughts or your emotions. This craving is not a luxury, it is a compass. It is guiding you back to yourself. You will be misunderstood, you will be judged, you will be told to soften, to shrink, to smile more. But those voices are echoes of a world that fears what it cannot control. Do not dim yourself to make others comfortable. Do not betray your truth to maintain an illusion. Do not confuse approval with alignment. The real ones will find you. But first, you must find yourself. And that begins with a choice. A choice to stop performing. A choice to stop pleasing. A choice to stop sacrificing what is real for what is acceptable. It is a quiet revolution, but it is the one that changes everything, not all at once, but slowly, moment by moment, breath by breath, truth by truth, until the life you are living is no longer a role, but a reflection, not of who you were told to be, but of who you are, who you've always been, underneath it all.